That's all I can think. There's Oscar Peterson's name and my name. And that's really something, Oscar Peterson. I knew him just a little bit. I never worked with him, but I played with him a few times, and I met him on a few occasions when neither one of us were playing. So I have very happy memories of knowing him, and when we played together, it was always fun. It was always very friendly and a lot of fun, and that's my memories of Oscar. And to get this award, I don't know, it's just amazing, really.
You played with him in Toronto?
A few times.
A few times.
I did some television shows on CBC, and we played together, and two or three times he would come to the club where I was playing and sit in with the band I was playing with, and it was always really very friendly and a lot of fun. It was very informal. It was never his own band, and so everything was very loose and unrehearsed, and it was just really nice.
Is there some question from the Daniel Lemay?
Mr. Thompson, Daniel Lemay, la presse newspaper. You've been around quite a long time. What has changed the most in your craft in the last 35 years, you would say?
In the actual music, the music's changed a lot. The music has gone in a lot of different directions. The fusion element has come in with all the rock influences and all the Latin influences from Brazil and Cuba. It's changed a lot that way, and which is most of that is a pretty positive thing, I think. But the downside of it is that the venues we used to play in are disappearing really fast. And like in Toronto, 35 years ago, we had a lot of clubs. Now we have hardly any, and the clubs we have only hire a band for one night a week, or one night. Actually, if you get a night, you might get another one 6 months from now. So that's changed, not for the good. But the music itself is actually getting better, I think. Some of the musicians I'm playing with now, some of the young musicians, are as good as anybody I've ever heard. And so the level of musicianship is amazing. You know, the people I'm playing with are amazing.
And you're well placed to talk about it because you're also a teacher.
Oh yes, I've been teaching at Humber College in Toronto for quite a few years now, and I've had some amazing students.
So the level of musician is better now than it was?
I think so. They have more information than we had. Like now on YouTube, and you can go on YouTube and watch John Coltrane or Art Tatum or Miles Davis, or basically anybody you want to watch, you can see them on YouTube. When I was a kid, to see jazz on television was a huge event. I can remember turning on the television and seeing Miles Davis playing with the Gilberts, you know, from Carnegie Hall, that famous concert, and watching that, and it was the biggest thing of the year. But now you can watch it on YouTube over and over and over. And so in a way, it's good because they have this information. The downside is that I think it was more important to us than it is to them now, because now it's so available that they sort of take it for granted. We never took anything for granted. Like if we heard jazz, it was hugely important. But now it's just so common that it might have lost some of that importance that it had for us. But the young musicians today are amazing. I'm working with young people from BC that are in my band. They're fantastic musicians. They're 21, 22 years old. And they're as good as anybody I've ever played with. So that's what's really great to me.
Peter Haddicle from the Gazette. You're a multi-instrumentalist. You've played percussion, piano, bass, vibes. What led you to explore all those things at the same time, and how do you find all the practice time chops together?
Now, when I was a kid, I didn't like doing anything else. And when I was in school, if there was an instrument in the school band, I'd just sort of pick it up and learn something about it so I'd be able to actually play it some. And then I don't know how I kept on going. I used to play trumpet too and French horn, but I had to let them go. I heard Dizzy Gillespie on a record one time, and so that was the end of my trumpet playing career. And there was no way I was going to mess with the trumpet after that. But I don't know. It was just the only thing I was interested in doing. It was just fun. I learned how to play piano first, and after that, all the other instruments, vibraphone relates to piano exactly. And so it was really easy to play vibes once you can play piano. That's actually true too. I've known lots of piano players that just will walk over and start playing on the vibes and sound good right away, even though they'd never played them before, because they know exactly what to do. And bass, I started playing bass because piano was so difficult. And I was listening to this record, and it occurred to me that this bass player is just playing 4 notes in the bar. And I thought, I should be able to do that. Because I was having a hard time with the piano. I had to play all those melodies and chords, and it was really difficult. And I thought, well, if I can't play 4 notes in the bar, there must be something wrong with me. So that's why I started playing bass, and it's actually not quite as easy as that, but I don't know, it's just the only thing I was ever interested in doing. So that's all.
You've worked with some amazing musicians in your career, John Handy, Jim Hall, George Shearing, Rob McConnell. Can you talk about some of these greats and what they gave you?
Well, John Handy, John was the first really great person I ever met in music. And I was only, 24, I guess. And John came up to Vancouver. I was the house piano player in a club. And the guy called me from the club. He says, how would you like to do a week with John Handy? And I didn't even know who, I just knew the name. I'd never heard John play. But P.J. Perry had told me that John Handy was a really good alto player. So I thought, well, sure, okay. So I showed up at this rehearsal. And John Handy comes in directly from the Monterey Jazz Festival, where he just played with Charles Mingus the night before, which had been the biggest concert in the history of the Monterey Jazz Festival. And that's all he could talk about. Mingus and Danny Richmond and Jackie Byard and all these guys that he'd been playing with the night before. And then he's showing me this music, which was so hard and so weird that it was just like, looked like science fiction. I was just looking at all this stuff on the paper, which I couldn't read at all. And it was really terrifying, actually. It was a frightening experience. But he was a really nice guy. I mean, a really nice guy and really patient. And so he's helped me along amazingly, actually. If another guy might have just said, well, let's get another piano player, because this guy can't play. But John didn't do that. He was patient enough with me, and he taught me how to play the music. And then ultimately, he hired me to play in his band for the next 3 years. And he kept giving me music lessons. I can remember exactly, in fact. I just say, one night we were playing in Milt Jackson's set and played piano. And I asked John, I said, man, what's he doing that's different than me? Because I don't, when I play blues, it sounds really corny, but when he plays it, it's all different. So John took me over to the house the next day, and he says, okay, here's what he does. And John played it on the piano. He said, now here's what you do, here's what he does. And then another time, I asked him what Coltrane was doing on impressions. Sounds like D minor, but it's a bunch of other stuff. He said, well, here's what it is, and here's how he does it, and here's why he does it. And he explained the whole logic of Coltrane's stuff that he was playing to me. This is like 1965. And John was fantastic like that. He would just sort of, anything I want to know, because there was hardly anything, there doesn't seem to be anything he doesn't know about music. So anything I need to know, he'd just spend all kinds of time and just explain it to me and teach me. He was something.
George Shearing?
George, the same thing. I mean, George never actually gave me lessons in that respect, but I stood right beside him for 5 years and played the bass. And what he knows about music, I mean, like if I ever was to learn 10% of what he knows about music, I'd really know a lot. But it was just endless. So working with George it was a fantastic experience, just learning about harmony and inner voice movement and learning tunes that I'd never heard before, and the whole experience. Plus, he was the best band leader that ever lived. He was just so great with the guys in the band. Any gig after that would be a bit of a letdown, I think. I don't know, I haven't had a gig since then. But no, George Shearing was a fantastic person to work with.
Daniel?
You're from out west, you're based in PO, and you win prizes in Montreal. What is it that you hear when you travel from west to east and back? What kind of music you hear? Does the music change when you're going further west?
I don't think so. The main difference is we have more musicians in let's say, I haven't been to Montreal for a while, and I know there's fantastic players here. I worked in Joe Sullivan's band about a year ago, and everybody in the band was amazing. And there was only 2 or 3 guys I knew, but everybody in the band was, I mean, they were ridiculous. They were so good. And so I know there's fantastic musicians in Montreal. And in Toronto we have great musicians too. But in Vancouver they do also, but not as many. then we've got really a lot of musicians in Toronto, but in Vancouver, there's just a small group. But the good guys out there are just as good as the good guys anywhere. Phil Dwyer's from out BC, and Brad Turner, there's a couple of guys that are as good as anybody I've ever heard. But they don't have the numbers. It's just a smaller group, that's all.
Thank you.
David Richman, formerly of Toronto and a friend of a bunch of Hunger kids. Do you find the three instruments you play inform each other? Do you find that your work on the bass has come back to your piano playing, and your piano playing influences your vibes playing?
To a degree, yeah. Everything comes from the piano, I think. So, vibes for sure. Although I don't play four mallets, so I can't do all that stuff Gary Burton does. But the concept of playing melodies, I guess, does come from the piano. And to a degree on the bass, too. But the person that is more responsible for my bass playing than anybody is Sonny Greenwich. Because I worked with Sonny for years and years. And I don't think there's anybody in the world that's ever had the impact on me that Sonny had. Because you all know Sonny, he's from Montreal. So you all know who he is and how great he is. And I worked with him hundreds of times, literally. I mean, for years, every gig he did, I played. And his concept of melody and phrasing and just the feeling in his music, he plays exactly the way I would love to be able to play on any instrument. But on piano, you obviously can't do that, and you can't do it on the vibes either. But on the bass, there's certain things you can do. Every instrument gives you something you can do, and so I guess it's just a matter of trying to figure out what it is. On vibes, you have a vibrato if you choose to use it. And I really like that. I can sort of pretend I'm a horn player. I can hit a note. I got a vibrato. I think, cool. And the note lasts a long time. On piano, I can play a bunch of chords and sound like an orchestra if I'd like to. But on bass, it's really hard. So, because there's not a heck of a lot you can do on bass, but there are some things. And once you figure out what they are, then it's just a matter of finding out how to do them, I guess. But Sonny Greenwich is probably the main person in my life, musically. I mean, he's really taught me a lot. Everybody's taught me something, but Sonny Greenwich has taught me really a lot, just about life and music and everything else.
You'll play with Terry Clark tonight?
Yeah. Terry and I've been...
Words about Terry?
Well, for me, it's hard to talk about Terry. We've been playing together since 1962.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Almost going on like 48 years we've been playing together. It's a long time. And I would guess that probably about 75% of the gigs I've ever played, he's been the drummer. And so, we know one another so well that he's reading my mind all the time. He knows, he knows exactly how to make it work with me. And so,
brothers?
Just about, yeah. He's almost like he's psychic. And besides being a phenomenal musician and drummer and everything else, he really knows me well. So it just makes everything so easy. I heard a story one time about a friend of mine asked Count Basie. He was playing drums in Basie's band. He says to Basie, "What do you like in a band?" And Basie, and the guy had the answer all in his head. He said, "Oh, I know what he's going to." He already knew what Basie was going to say. He knew he was going to want the brass to really be punching and the rhythm section to lock in, and all that stuff. He had it all figured out. But he asked him anyhow, and Basie just said to him, "I like a band. That sounds like a band." And the guy told me, he said he was so disappointed because he thought, there's got to be more to it than that. It can't just be that. But then he said about weeks and weeks went by and he thought about it, and then he finally figured out what he was trying to say. Well, Terry makes any band sound like a band. Like when I play with Terry, it always sounds like, even if we're playing for the first time with a bunch of guys he doesn't even know, and we're playing music that he's sight reading, it still sounds like a rehearsed band. He has that genius of being able to make any group sound good just by showing up. And that makes him, to me, it makes him pretty special.
We lost Rob McConnell a couple of months ago. What did he mean to you?
Oh, Rob was like a brother to me. He was basically like we were like family, and it was a huge loss in my life. I don't know, I can't even talk about Rob very much. No, I was in his band for 25 years, and then I was out of it for a while, and then I was back in it again. And I mean, his life without Rob is not as much fun.
as a teacher, you meet a lot of good musicians today. So do you think it's harder now when you speak to your students? Is it harder for them to find some good job, and for you, is it harder than before for finding good gigs and doing well?
It has to be harder. I don't know. I don't know what. I don't worry about it. I can't worry about it. Like if I've got 25 or 30 students, I can't really worry myself about what they're going to do when they get out of school. But it can't be as easy as it was for me. I know when I was 20 and started playing, Cannonball, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, the Modern Jazz Quartet, Wes Montgomery, Horace Silver. I mean, there was a list of bands that went on forever, and every one of them was a potential gig. That's the way we looked at it. Terry Clark and I, when we grew up, we knew all the tunes that all these guys played. And if Miles had showed up in town and needed a rhythm section, and we could have played. We knew everything he'd ever recorded, and we could have played it. But now there's no gigs like that. I mean, and there's very few touring bands around anymore. So that situation we had doesn't exist anymore. So, but they always do something. I mean, my students, they're good players, and they always find something to do. So, I don't know. I don't worry about it. It's not as much fun for them, but it's still good.